So welcome all. So let's actually continue with the, remember what we were doing? We were actually dealing with, now we wanted to understand how prices are determined in a market, and the market structure that we were considering was perfectly competitive market, okay? And remember, we learned about also the market supply and market demand, right? So we figured out how to get the market supply and how to get the market demand. So now you guys, you'll see that if I give you some individual demands and individual supplies, right? So you know how to get the market supply and the market demand. And remember we said that we're going to bring them together, but the market structure might change. The one that we're going to see is the perfectly competitive market. So before we start, let me actually write down the characteristics of a perfectly competitive market, okay? So perfect competition. Now let me write down the assumptions. So we're going to see that, and remember, so we started dealing with the perfectly competitive market, and remember what we did? We learned about the market demand, and we learned about the market supply, okay? But remember, the supply curve was a little bit different than demand curve, because we said that how people actually, how firms act is different, right? How firms act is different in the short run and in the long run. So remember, we divided this market supply into like 3 time periods, let's say it. We said very short run, we said short run, right? And in the very short run, remember, you went to the farmer's market with all your tomatoes. There's no way you can increase or decrease your production, right? Decrease your output. When there's a change and when you observe some change in price or whatever. But you know that if you think of for that day, but if you think of the time period a little bit longer, then you can always go back to your farm and then maybe just get more tomatoes and then bring them back to the farmer's market, right? So we said that in the very short run, supply curve was what? So this was price, this was quantity. It looked like what? Supply curve. So let's put the little q to indicate that it's for a single firm. It was like this vertical one, right? So we call this, so this is called what? So we call this is perfectly inelastic, right? Supply. So this is basically, so you can put it like this. And of course, if all the firms are like that, so of course the market supply would be like this, right? And but we said that in the short run, we would have our the short run supply curve, right? And then it would be, we wrote that it's going to be something like this, right? So for a single firm, it's going to be, remember, the supply curve that we derived, right? So we're going to call this supply short run. It's going to be upward sloping. There is also the third one, but which we haven't covered, but we will, okay? We will come to this. So what about the supply curve of a firm in the long run, okay? This we haven't covered. And remember, and you see that in order to understand the market supply, we need to know what is the market structure, how these firms compete and such. So the one that we considered was a price-taking firm, right? So we said that, and you'll see that in perfect competition, firms are actually price takers, okay? So let me write down the assumptions. So we know that in a perfectly competitive market, there are large numbers of firms, okay? So each producing some, let's call it same homogeneous product. Okay, so this is important. There is not much room for differentiation, okay? So a tomato is a tomato, right? So like wheat is wheat. So you might say the hocam, but there's organic tomato, there's just these heirloom, you know what they are? Bu hibrit olanlar var. So they're just these hybrid ones. So, but you know, like, I mean, don't consider the organic ones. Mostly tomatoes are, you know, you cannot differentiate it too much, right? So you can say that it's a cocktail tomato or it's a cherry tomato, but among them you might not be able to differentiate too much, okay? So it's important that they are producing the same homogeneous product, because if there is some sort of a difference in these products, then these firms might have some sort of a market power, right, because of their product. So if their product is unique, you might want to go and specifically buy from that guy. That is going to be different, okay? So that's why we said that what is important is there are a large number of firms and they're producing same homogeneous product, okay? And then the second one is, again, we assume that firms are profit maximizers, okay? So firms, remember this was an assumption as well. Firms are profit maximizers, okay? So, and then we said that each firm is a price taker. So let's say each firm is a price taker. So it assumes its actions. What does this mean? It means that it assumes its actions, they don't have any effect on the market price, okay? So they don't have any effect on the market clearing price, which we will see, you know, how it is going to be determined, because still I haven't defined the equilibrium yet, right? So we got the market supply, market demand, but we haven't talked about the equilibrium. Whenever you need to talk about the equilibrium, you have to define it, okay? So we're going to define the equilibrium. So this is going to be each firm is a price taker. We said that there is perfect information. So this means that prices, you know, like all the information is known to the participants of the market, okay? So everyone knows about the price. So like everyone knows about, so there is no such thing that some people know some stuff, bless you, and some people they don't know, okay? So this is what we mean by perfect information. So prices are assumed to be known by all market participants, okay? So, and then there is, we said that transactions are costless. So if like making these transactions are costly, that is a problem as well, okay? So a problem in the sense that then we won't be able to have, you know, like this ideal, perfectly competitive market, okay? So that's why we said that transaction is that, you know, like you sell tomatoes, I want to buy tomatoes. This is a transaction, right? I buy tomatoes from you, you sell me tomatoes. If there is a cost, for instance, let's say the farmer's market is really far. I have to go there, you know, like, and it's really costly, okay, to go and get this. Or suppose, you know, there is a dispute between us, okay? So like anything that you can think of that when we're exchanging goods, if there's any cost, it shouldn't be there, okay? Then that is going to be different than an ideal, perfectly competitive market, okay? So like buyers and sellers, they incur no cost when they make these exchanges, okay? So this is basically the case. Also, you can say that there are also large number of demanders, okay? There are large numbers of demanders as well, okay? Each one is also a price taker, okay? So they are also too little to change the market clearing price, okay? So just think of it like this. Now, this is for short run though, okay? In the long run, I'm going to add here that there are no barriers for entry and exit, okay? Because now I'm going to show you the equilibrium for the short run. And then we're going to talk about the long run equilibrium. So that's why I didn't write down, but then in the long run, I'm going to add here that there are no barriers for entry and exit, okay? If you want to produce tomatoes, you can, like find a small piece of land, or even if you want, you can just grow them in your balcony or whatever, right? So in your garden at home. So of course there might be some barriers, but it's not like entering the, cellular phone service market, right? So I don't have any cell phone towers. I cannot acquire them that easily, but I can grow tomatoes, right? So, or selling simit at Kızılay. I can just get some simit from somewhere and I can sell them, right? So it's very easy to enter that market, okay? Compared to some other ones, okay? So now that I'm going to add for the long run, okay? Now, let me define, so after I wrote this, let me define you, now we have the market supply, we have the market demand, so let me define the equilibrium, okay? So the equilibrium in the short run, or in general, I can actually write this down. So let's say this, equilibrium price, okay? So we usually denote it by P star. So remember, this was the whole idea of this course. I mean, it wasn't the whole idea, but this is where we wanted to reach, right? We wanted to understand, everyone is asking about, like the price of something, right? Whether it's the price of dollars, or it's like price of oil, or even price of olives. Now that they say that, or olive oil right now, they say that because it's actually olive oil prices, they are increasing a lot because of some sort of a drought in the, I think, like with the olive, in the, I think it's in the olive production, they cannot get as many yield as in the previous year, so which affects the olive oil production, and then the prices they will increase, okay? So what is important is most of the time that people would like to know about the price, but we know that in order to understand the price, how price is determined, we know that it's determined in the market, we know that it's going to be determined via the interaction of demand and supply, but you see that throughout this course, we learned what lies behind that demand and what lies behind that supply, right? What kind of an individual behavior lies behind those curves, basically, okay? So now we are achieving our, final, or our final goal, let's say, and how equilibrium price is going to be determined, okay? Equilibrium price is determined, so we need to define it, as I said, where, so let's actually say that you guys probably know from your introductory classes, where the market demand, right, so let's put it P star, so P prime is going to be the price of all other goods, okay? So, and income, but this is, if it's market demand, if everyone has the same income, it's not a problem. But remember, if people have different incomes, it also depends on the distribution of income. So this could also be a vector. Remember, we discussed about these. And then, so this should be equal to quantity supplied, right? So this was a function of what? Supply was a function of what? Supply curve? Wage, right? So you guys know wage, R, and P star, right? Remember the output price, right? So we said that, and of course, if it's short run, then of course we need to put the capital stock there. Let's say we have two inputs. But if it's long run, right? So we don't have to consider, like the fixed input, remember? So this is basically, so the equilibrium price is determined where, so this P star should make these guys equal to each other. Equilibrium is something that none of these agents, they would like to move, okay? Here, do they have any tendency to go anywhere else? Is there a surplus or a shortage? No, right? So they are, so whatever would like to be supplied is actually demanded, right? So people would like to buy this much, and sellers, they would like to supply exactly as that much, okay? So that's why we call this an equilibrium, because none of these people would like to move, would like to go somewhere else, okay? Somewhere else meaning that some other point, right? So this is basically the case. Or if you want, you can say it, so you can just plug in all these other stuff, right? So they would be given to you. So where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied, okay? So you see that, so this is how we define this, and at this price, neither consumers nor sellers, you know, like would like to go anywhere else, okay? So this is the definition of equilibrium price, okay? So this is basically the case. So like they don't have any incentive to change their, you know, like behavior, right? Here. So if we want to, so you probably know this, but if we want to show this on a graph, this is what? So I'm going to put here a firm, okay? So let's say this is a firm, and this is going to be, so this is a firm, so this is P, and this is little q, okay? And let me put this market, so I'm going to put cap Q here and P here, and I'm going to put here an individual, okay? One of you guys. So let's call this QD, and I'm gonna put here QS, okay? So suppose this is going to be, so you guys would have individual demands, right? So let's put it like this, D. So remember what we do is we add up all your individual demands and we got the market demand, right? So let's say we got this guy, okay? We horizontally add all these up. And then these, we know that this firm, a firm, he will have this supply function, right? This firm will have the supply curve in the short run. So what was determining its supply? So let's put it like this. Suppose we have the short run, so let's put it like this, a short run average cost, okay? And let me put short run marginal cost, but you know that, hocam, short run average variable cost is important because that's going to determine the shutdown point, right? So just keep this in your mind. So this goes through its minimum, right? So that's what we said. Now, here's what happens, okay? So suppose the short run, and you add up all these short run marginal curves of all these guys, but if they're identical, right? If these guys are, let's say they're all the same, then what's going to happen? Then they would all have the similar marginal cost curves, right? And then you're going to, so the market supply curve is going to be, you know, very similar to an individual one. But just keep that in your mind. So here is the issue, for instance, but then we need to draw the market supply curve also as we draw, right? So like maybe, remember it was 0 until this point, and then it was starting afterwards, it was starting from some point, right? So, but suppose we have different firms. Suppose they have different cost structures. Suppose they're not all identical, but they have different cost structures. Then the supply curve, the market supply curve can be smoother, right? Because for some points, some guys, for some prices, some guys will supply, the other ones won't. But for, remember the market supply that we considered last time, right? There they did have different supply curves. And then remember, so we, in the market supply, we had something like this. So from here, just one was supplying, right? And then afterwards we had, right, again, so we had a flatter total supply curve, right? So we had something like this. So basically, suppose we have many firms, and then they have different minimum average variable costs, right? So then it's going to get, this market supply curve is going to get much smoother, okay? Because there would be someone filling up the gaps here, there would be other people filling up the gaps there, okay? So we considered the, how shall I say, the most general one, okay? General in the sense that, and then, but mostly when you draw the market supply, you see that they're going to draw something like this, okay? But just keep this in your mind. We know how to draw it properly, okay? So basically, so these are the, you know, like the market demand, and then suppose we get the market supply, so it would be something like this, okay? And then, so let's do it. So this is going to be the market supply. Then it says that equilibrium price is the price level which is going to set quantity demanded in the market equal to quantity supplied. Basically, it's going to be the intersection of these two guys, okay? So let's put this Q star and let's put this P star, okay? And Q star is called either the market clearing quantity or market, like the equilibrium quantity, okay? Then you see, remember these guys were price takers. So what do? They take their, if I want to find their individual prices, individual, let's say, demand and individual supplies, so let's say an individual here, then, so for this firm, for instance, what does this firm do? It takes this price as given, right? So I'll call this P star. So basically, it takes this price as given, and where does this firm produce? How much will this firm produce? Right, where price is equal to marginal cost, right? So this is basically, so you go and you check, oh, hocam, it's already above the average cost. So like, not, we don't have to consider the variable cost because it's already even above the average cost, right? So you can call this Q star S. So this is the individual quantity that this firm is producing. And an individual would demand, also individual is the price taker. An individual would demand this much, QD star, let's put it, okay? Suppose suddenly all of you guys have higher income. Suppose, let's say, one of you, so instead of in this market, suppose suddenly one of you have a little bit more income. What's going to happen in the market? What did we say? It's not going to affect anything because in this type of market structure, we assume you guys are atomistic. You guys are so little, you cannot affect anything, okay? So too bad, but, right? So that's what we, that's one of the assumptions. But suppose all of you guys have an increase in your income, okay? So what's going to happen to the demand curve? All of you guys would have an individual demand. What's going to happen to the demand curve? It's going to shift where? To the north. So it's right. So it shifted to the. It's going to shift to the right, right? So let's call this D prime, right? So if all of you, if all your demand curves shift, obviously the market demand is going to shift. Let's say D prime, okay? And then what's going to happen? So let's call this E0 if you want, okay? And then, so what's going to happen? Now this is the new market demand. There's no change in market supply. And then this is going to be, let's call this E1, okay? Now we're going to have a new clearing price, right? And a new equilibrium quantity, okay? We will have a new equilibrium price and a new equilibrium quantity. And then, of course, we go here. And then we're going to have, so this is going to be the new individual. So let's call QS double star, okay? So this we know, okay? So this is basically the case. So now, from now on, you'll see that we're going to have one graph for the market and one graph, sometimes two, like for the individuals, okay? Either firm or, like a consumers, okay? So this is basically the case if this happens. Okay, so let me ask you one thing. So now you see that there is a shift in demand. So suppose you are interested, okay, so demand is going to change. How would this affect, how much of an effect this would have on the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, for instance? Or you want to know how much this would have an effect on the equilibrium price. So, for instance, I have a supply curve like this. Suppose I had a supply curve like this. So suppose it's the same shift. But suppose I have a supply curve, let's call this SA, I don't know, SB. Suppose I have a supply curve like this. In which one do you think we're going to have market clearing price is going to increase more?
SA.
So which one? In SA, right? So here, because the market clearing price is going to be somewhere here, right? So let's call it P prime, okay? So what do you think is determining this kind of increase?
Elasticity.
It's related to the elasticity, okay? So which supply curve do you think is more elastic?
SB.
Right, so it's going to be, it means that SP, right? Because it is, SP is more elastic, right? Because it's, if you're actually looking at these two curves, as long as they go through as long as they go through one point, okay, and it's the same, then you can always say that the one that has a flatter slope, right? So the one that is flatter has, its elasticity is actually higher, okay? So you see that SP is a more elastic curve, and then elastic supply, and you see as it gets more elastic, apparently the increase in the price, market clearing price, is going to be less, okay? So this is what you can figure out from the graph, but what we can do is we can actually figure this out via math as well, okay? So this is what we will basically do. So let's actually write this down. So we can always demonstrate these stuff mathematically, okay? So as I said, so let me check, what time is it? Okay, so it's, so let's write this, okay? Now I'm going to denote, so this is very important. So you see this is what, if anyone asks you, you know, this is kind of the power of micro. So you can see that, you guys, even though elasticity sounded like a very abstract concept, it can tell a lot. And then later you'll see that we're going to see, you know, it's going to be very important in order to understand the consequences, or what we call the incidence of a tax, okay? So who's paying more, right? If there's a tax, or if taxes are increased, or if they are decreased, right? So who's going to pay? Who's going to pay the real burden? Okay, so these are very important. And this is related to the elasticity, okay? So you're going to see that, but you see when there's a shift in demand, how much of an effect this is going to make on the equilibrium price depends on the elasticity of supply. So when there is a shift in supply, how much of this will, this will affect the equilibrium price by how much is going to be determined via the elasticity of supply. Elasticity of demand, right? Did I say the other way around? But here, right, so when there's a demand shift, it will depend on the elasticity of supply. When there's a supply shift, how much equilibrium price will change will depend on the elasticity of demand, okay? So for instance, whenever they put a tax on the producers, let's say, you know, like they say that I'm going to get it from them, then, then you're going to see that how much it will affect the equilibrium price is going to depend on the elasticity of demand. If it's an inelastic demand, let's say cigarettes, you know that, is it going to change a lot, the quantity? If it's inelastic, you know, cigarettes, no matter how much tax they put on, or, you know, like some of these, or let's say rakı, we know that these are inelastic goods. So you put a lot, but actually it's only going to increase the market price, right? It's not going to affect the quantity that these guys are consuming that much, right? Basically the market equilibrium quantity, okay? It's not going to change that much. So, but we were always saying this using graphs and by some intuition and such, but now we have enough tools so we can say all of these mathematically, okay? So now what I will do is that I'm going to call this guy market demand. So let's say denote, okay, so that you would have proper notes. Let's say, let's put this, okay, shifts. So the effect of shifts in demand and supply on P star. You know that P star is the market clearing price or the equilibrium price, okay? So let's try to see this. Now we denote market demand by QD, Okay, so let's call this denote market demand by QD. And then let's write it like this. It's a demand curve which depends on P, right? And some demand shifters, okay? So we call them alpha. So what are these? So these are what? Alpha, we call them demand shifters, okay? So what does this mean? Demand shifters. Demand shifters are what? What would shift the demand curve? What factors? These shocks, right? But you know, right? What were the, in very simple terms, demand curve was a function of, Marshallian demand curve was a function of what? Px, Py, and income, right? So remember we said that, and whenever we draw the demand curve, it was, remember, like holding all the other things the same, ceteris paribus or ceteris paribus, right? And we were holding these guys the same. So whenever these guys change, they would cause a shift. So demand shifters are what? Examples are income, right? Prices of other goods. So what else? Remember you guys told me? Preferences, right? What you like and what you don't like. So even though you don't see preferences as a function here, it determines that X star, right? You change the Cobb-Douglas, remember even the exponents, you get a different demand function. So basically, as you said, preferences. And of course, on a more general level, you can say that, you know, expectations about the futures and such, okay? So any of these could be a demand shifter, okay? Now we write this down as general, okay, in this form. So what is this? So let me ask you this. So del D over del P. What is this? When price of this good increases, P refers to the price of this own price. So what is this? What's the sign of this guy? This is when price increases, what happens to quantity demanded? It will decrease, but for which ones? If it's a normal good, if it's an inferior good, but not given, right? Only for given goods, this is positive, right? Price increases. Remember, I didn't say income. So for inferior goods, when income increases, quantity demanded would fall, okay? So we said that it's going to affect, so when there's an increase in income, your demand, you would feel if it's an inferior good, right, you're going to decrease your consumption. But still overall, remember, substitution effect dominates the income effect. So if it's not given, this is always negative. Only if it's given, it's going to be positive, okay? So this is basically the case. So this is actually, so let's denote it by dP, okay? And what is the sign of this? What is this? We don't know, right? It depends on the effect. And we don't know, you know, if it's income, but if it's an inferior good, it's different, right? If it's normal. So this depends on, we don't know, depends on alpha. Okay? Now can have any sign. Okay? So I'm going to denote this by d alpha. Okay? Now, let's do the same for market supply. Okay, so let me write it here. Okay, I can write this here. So let's have it for market supply. Again, I'm going to have, so what do you think is going to affect the market supply? By the way, like, I think I'm going to evaporate after some time because of the heat, but anyways, so it's so what affects, so whatever, you know, like for the law of the science we continue, right? So it's yes, at some point probably I might ask you guys to decrease it a little bit. So but basically, what are the shift factors for supply? Let's put it like that. So I'm going to have very similar notation for market supply. So what is going to shift market supply? So other than, right, price of it, the own good, what would be, you know, like these are called demand shifters. What do you think supply shifters are? So let's put it market supply, so let's say denote market supply by QS, okay? It's going to be S price beta. So these beta are what we call supply shifters. Okay? What are these supply shifters? Wage, right? So remember, just always try to remember, okay, we derived all these supply curves. It must be for a good reason, right? So basically, this was the supply curve, right? So we said Q, wage, R. What was it? P. So this is the on price, right? And then you see that apparently input costs, right? So we can say that input prices. What else? So it's basically input prices, right? Like the cost of labor, cost of capital. What else?
Technology.
Technology, right? Remember, just as you were changing even the exponents of Cobb-Douglas, and this one was changing. Remember, you change production function, and then this guy is going to change, right? The supply curve is going to change. So now we can say technology. What else? Weather, right? So let's put it, of course, like some outside conditions, definitely. What else? So again, future expectations, but these we're talking about shocks. What are these shocks, right? So productivity shocks could be to the technology, definitely, or to the input prices, definitely. Also, because we were thinking about this price-taking firm and perfect competition, we did not, but you see that it's very important. Sometimes, suppose you're a multi-product firm, okay? You're producing many products. Then price of your other products might also affect your supply in this product, okay? It might be, suppose you're producing salep, and let's say hot chocolate, okay? So suddenly hot chocolate becomes more, profitable. Then you might switch your production to hot chocolate and decrease your supply production, okay? That might be a shock. And then, right, so that might be a shock, but it might affect, okay? That's here we're talking about the very simple firm, but always keep in your mind that, and also, of course, if these are not price takers, if there's some sort of a strategic, actions going on, prices of other products might also affect, how you're going to supply, how much you're going to supply. So you can actually put all these, so let's say prices of other potential, let's say, outputs for a multi-product firm, okay, so let's put it. Also, what else? This is important, we can put something. What else? It is going to shift what will shift your supply? There is something that this is very easy, but we didn't write. What is it? Do you think it will affect, this is market supply. So it's going to be affect, you're adding everyone. So how much is everyone, right? What's the number, right? Number of suppliers definitely is going to, it will be a supply shifter, okay? So let's put it, producers. Okay? But you'll see that in the long run, so remember, in the short run, I said that number of producers is fixed. In the long run, it will be endogenously determined, okay, in the market. So you're going to see. So this is basically the case. Now, suppose there is a shift. So let me do this. So let's have this. Suppose, so let's do this and then we'll give a break. Suppose there is a shift, okay, of demand and supply stays the same. Supply stays the same. Okay? Suppose demand is going, some of these demand shifters, some shock happened. So like now demand has shifted and supply curve stays the same. What's going to happen? So now with my notation, I can do this. So I can have a look at this. So I say, I want to know, right? So when this changes, okay? So suppose there's a shift of demand. So how much this quantity demanded, right? So don't forget that this is going to be the equilibrium quantity, right? In the end, how much the equilibrium quantity is going to change, okay? So this is basically this one. And of course, so let's see. So this is, so, or you can think of it like this. So this is how much demand is going to change, and this is how much supply is going to change, right? So the shift. So you can actually, so I'm going to put alpha, because alpha, right? So there has been a change in the demand. Shift of demand, suppose due to this alpha shifter, okay? So this is basically the case. Now let me write this. So remember, I write QD like that. So what is this? If I want to reach alpha, how can I do that? Of course, I'm going to have d alpha, but is that it? So if I write this, this is enough. Is this enough? So demand, remember, always remember the graphs that you've been drawing, you know, in your introductory econ courses, right? Ever since the beginning, right? So this is the demand curve. This is the supply curve. So when there's a shift in the demand, right? I mean, it's going to change also so when demand changes, right? It's going to change the market clearing price, right? So the market clearing price is going to change. So therefore, this P, so alpha is going to affect this P as well, right? So this P is a function of, in a sense, alpha, okay? So that's why this is not enough. So I have to have plus D, so let's put it like this, dP, so let's say D, let's put it like this. So let's say dP, okay? And then we're going to have, so this is basically the derivative of the demand with respect to P. And then you have dP d alpha, okay? So basically, so what I did is that I took the derivative with respect to alpha, but I kept in my mind that there is alpha in the demand function, yes, so you can think of it, there's income in the demand function. And also, this is going to change the equilibrium price as well. So this is the effect of that, okay? Now, if I write here, what should I write? So according to this same logic, I'm going to write S alpha, right? So where's the supply? Plus, I'm going to write SP, right? And then I'm going to write dP d alpha, okay? So this is basically the case. And I didn't tell you, but what is SP? So SP, let's call this del S over del P. What is this? What is the sign of this? It is positive, right? So this is positive. And what about S beta, del S over del beta? Again, we don't know. It depends, right? So now, what can I say? Can I say anything further here? So what is this guy? Alpha. So you see that, suppose it's your income. So your income, so suppose there has been a change in income, right? So all of your incomes have increased. We drew that, remember? So the market demand has shifted, okay? So this is going to affect, what will this affect on the supply side? It's going to have an effect through the equilibrium price, right? Because you guys demand more, it's going to, drive the equilibrium price up. That's how. But do you think it's going to affect the production, like the nature of the production, right? Process of the suppliers? No. That's why these guys are called demand shifters and supply shifters, meaning that they would only shift demand and they would only shift supply curves, okay? So therefore, this is 0. But it will have an effect, obviously, on the suppliers through the equilibrium price, obviously, right? Because now suppliers would see that, oh, now there is more, demand in this market. I'm going to supply more, right? And they would say that I'm going to supply more, but because I have my supply curve, because price is going up, that's why the amount that I'm going to supply is going to be larger. Okay, I'm not going to change my supply curve. Okay, so basically this is 0, fine. Now we know that if we need to stay in the equilibrium, so the change in quantity demanded and the change in quantity supplied should be equal, right? So they were equal to begin with, right? So that was the definition of equilibrium. After the change that this, shock generated in the quantity demanded and the change this shock generated in quantity supply should be the same, so that they would be the same again, right? So they were the same to begin with. So let's actually do this. So let's actually put this down. So I'll keep those ones there. Let me write this and then we'll give the break. Ay. Bunu ben şey yapacağım. Buharlaşacağım. Şuradan. Ya da kapıyorum. So let's, yes. Okay, so let's actually have this. So did you get this, right? So remember, let me write this. So we know that in initial equilibrium, we know that quantity demanded, right, QD was equal to QS, right? So this is the equilibrium condition. That's what we know, right? In initial, let's put it, market equilibrium. So these guys were the same, okay? So after the shift, of course they will change, right? These amounts would change, but but they should still be equal to each other, right? So after the shift, they should still be equal, right? Hence, dQd, dP, d alpha, dQs, d alpha should be the same, right? So whatever change these are going to generate in these quantity demanded amount and the quantity supplied amount should be the same, okay? So this is what we said. So now let's put those expressions in their places. So d alpha, dP, dP, d alpha, okay? So this should be equal to, that is 0, S P, dP, right, d alpha, okay? So what we can do is that we can take this into the parentheses, right? So let's put it like this. So let's write it, so let's do it. So let's take it into the dP parentheses. So I'm going to put this guy here. So dP, d alpha parentheses, okay? So this is here, I write d of p, basically it's the, like the derivative of the demand with respect to p, okay? And minus sp, and then I put this guy on the other side, minus d alpha, okay? And then dp, d alpha is going to be minus d alpha, dp minus sp, okay? So what does this mean? This is what we were looking for. There is a change in income. I want to know how this is going to affect the market clearing price, okay? The equilibrium price. So this is mathematically saying that. So in your incomes have changed, what kind of an effect this would have on equilibrium price level, which is this, okay? And you see that this derivative is equal to this guy. Okay, so let's see. So what does this mean? It means, so which one sign do you think it would depend on? What is this? dP is what? We know this is what? This is positive or negative. This is negative, right? This guy is what? Positive. So altogether this guy inside is negative, right? So this is negative, so this is negative, they would cancel out. So this would depend on whether, so I ask you, whether market price is going to increase or decrease. You would tell me, hocam, it will depend on the demand shifter, right? If it's income, and if it's a normal good, then it's going to, what? Increase or decrease the market clearing price. Suppose your incomes increase, you see? So suppose your incomes increase, you know it, graphically, but now you can see it from here. Suppose your incomes increase. So what is this? D alpha, the derivative of this demand curve with respect to income is positive, right? So this is going to be, so altogether, this is going to be positive, right? So when your incomes increase, market clearing price will, of course, this is what we see in real life, right? So there's no change in technology or anything. Suddenly people started demanding more olive oil, let's say, okay? Or, I don't know, like black figs. So immediately the price of black figs would increase, okay? So you see that we can just express everything like this. So now let's give a break and then we'll continue, okay? Alrighty, so let's actually continue. So remember, we actually said that how much of this shift is going to affect the clearing price. So some of your friends were asking me, so market clearing price is, whenever I say market clearing price, it's the equilibrium price because it clears the market, right? Quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied, okay? So this is basically the case. Now, let's actually do this also for the supply shift. So let's do it. So basically, let's, so now let's actually do this. The second one. So the first one. Now we said that suppose there is a shift in supply. Okay, and demand stays the same. Demand stays the same. Okay, so now this is going to be, so let's actually do this by similar logic, right? dQd d beta. So let's put it like this, dP alpha d beta. So how shall I get this? How shall I get this one? What is this? So suppose there is a shift in supply, but demand stays the same. So remember, this beta was a supply shifter. So how shall I write this down? So with the similar logic, I should write, right? So first, remember, we were writing it. So this is d. Okay, how should I write? I should write d beta, right? And plus, I should write dp dp d beta. What can I say about this? So what is this? What is this guy? What is this guy? 0, right? So basically, so you see that it's going to, you can always think that, demand, there's a supply shifter, so it's going to affect the demand only through the equilibrium price, right? Because it's going to, because this thing does not affect. So suppose this is the change in number of suppliers, right? So it has changed. So it's not going to affect demand, my demand, right? So basically, but it's going to affect how much I'm going to demand, right? The quantity demanded, if it changes market clearing price, right? If it changes the equilibrium price. So that's basically the case. But now, if you do this for the supply, of course, function, right? The market supply function, then the story would be different. So this is P beta, D beta. This time, this is going to be S beta, right? Plus, it's going to be S P D P D beta, right? It's going to change the supply curve. We know it's going to shift the supply curve. Also, we might be moving along the supply curve because equilibrium price is going to change, okay? So if you do the similar stuff, you're going to get, if you just set these guys the same, remember, so like similarly, so we know that in equilibrium, we know that these guys should be equal to each other, if you want. QD should be equal to QS. So they were equal to each other to begin with. we want them to be equal after the change as well. Therefore, the changes in them should be the same. Okay, so this is what we can actually say. So d beta. So if you do this, you would get this. S beta dp minus sp. Okay, so you can do the similar calculations, and this is what you would get. Okay. Now, what is this? So what is dp? Remember, we said that this is the derivative of the demand function with respect to price. What is it? This is negative, right? So what is this? sp, derivative of the supply curve with respect to price. It is positive. So therefore, altogether, this guy is negative. So you see, it depends on sb. Suppose beta is the input prices. Suppose beta is input prices. What's going to happen? So suppose input prices increase. Okay. So what's going to happen? So it's, but it doesn't matter, right? This is the derivative, right? So it's going to be, it says if input prices would affect supply curve how? In a positive manner or in a negative manner? When input prices increase, you decrease your supply, right? When input prices increase, you decrease, you increase your supply, right? So this is going to be, so this way, if it's negative, then it's going to be negative, okay? So we can actually say this, SB is going to be negative, okay? So because bottom is negative, this guy is negative, therefore, overall, what's going to happen? If input prices increase, we know the output price is going to increase as well, okay? So this is going to be the case. Now, so we can also, remember I said that, but this has something to do with the elasticities. So I keep my promise, and then I'm going to show you the link with the elasticity, okay? Now, this is going to be the case. So we can also use it using elasticity. So let's say this, using elasticities, okay? So we say we can also express these using elasticity. So let's do this. So dp d alpha. So let's say there's a demand, right? So one of the shift factors in demand has changed. So this is basically, so let's actually, this we said that d alpha, right? sp minus dp, okay? So this is basically, now what I will do is that I'm going to put here alpha over p, alpha over p, okay? And then I'm going to put a q over q. So you'll understand, remember, whenever we need to convert stuff to elasticities, we have to do these. Now, this is going to be, basically, what is this? So if you just look at this, suppose, so this is kind of, we haven't defined this, but you see that this is the, right, P alpha, right? So let's call it elasticity P alpha. So suppose there is a, like a shift factor, how much this would affect our equilibrium price, right? So this is going to be the case. So let's put it like this. So this is, what is the responsiveness? What is the responsiveness? What is the responsiveness of the price to changes in alpha? Okay, so this is something. It doesn't, elasticity is a concept. It doesn't have to be income elasticity, price elasticity all the time. It can have different interpretations at other times as well, okay? Now, what is this? So let's write this. What is this guy? If I take d alpha, right? And so for instance, these guys. So what is this? So let me take this part. What is d alpha? D alpha was, remember, it was you take the derivative of demand function with respect to alpha. So that's what we said. Times, so now here, that is this. So this times alpha over, right, Q. So this demand is basically quantity, right? So what is this? Suppose alpha is income. Suppose alpha is income, let's say. What is this? Then this is del, right? So put it Q, you can put del Q, del I over Q. This is income elasticity, right? So this is elasticity with respect to the shift factor, whatever, okay? So apparently I have this elasticity, so let me write this. Elasticity of Q alpha. If alpha is income, then that's going to be income elasticity of demand, right? So what about the bottom? So I have this guy. What is dP? I know that dP is del Q over del P, right? So it's the derivative of the demand curve with respect to price. And here I have a Q over P, right? So what is this? I have a P, so let's put it, şöyle yazalım. Okay, so this top part I figured out. Now I'm going to write these guys. So this is, SP is del S over del P, okay? So I can actually call it QS, okay? Del P. And then I'm going to put P over Q here. I put Q down and then this is going to be del, instead of dP, I write QD del P, P over Q. What are these guys? What is this? Del Q over del P, P over Q. This is price elasticity, but for which curves? Supply, right? And this is price elasticity for demand, right? So this is basically, so I write this elasticity, so let's put it Q S, or let's put it S, let's do it easier, and this is going to be dP. So this is the supply elasticity, this is the demand elasticity, okay? So this is basically the case. So let's put it overall. You see that responsiveness of the equilibrium price to any change, it depends on the elasticities, right? So the elasticity of that change, of course, and these guys, okay? So this is important. Now let me ask you this. Suppose I have, remember, it's coming back to our question. Remember I said that suppose there is a shift. Suppose I have two supply curves, SA, SB. Remember from our previous class. So this is Q. And suppose I said that there was a shift in demand. So suppose we were here to begin with, and demand shifted this much. Which one would cause a higher increase, right, in equilibrium price, right? That's what we asked. And you said that, hocam, whichever one has the higher elasticity, the price change would be lower, right? So that's what you said, right? So this guy has a higher elasticity. So here the equilibrium price for D prime is P prime. Here the equilibrium price is P, let's say. So let's call this P0 to begin with, okay? Sorry, so this is P prime and this is P, okay? So you see that the increase with the inelastic supply would be more in the market clearing price. The increase with the elastic supply in price would be less, right? Now let's try to see this here, okay? Now, so let's put it like this. So if you, okay, so I'll write it like this. Suppose, because it's the same demand structure, right? So suppose in these two cases, what should I, how can I write this? So this is, let's say, case 1. So let's say that ESP is high. Okay? Suppose it's high. So because it's the same demand structure, and suppose incomes increase, right? So this is going to be the same, right? So this is basically what we said. The elasticity of demand curve with respect to income, because it's the same demand curve, it's going to be the same in both cases, right? So let's put this, so P alpha, so this is EQ alpha, ESP minus EDP, okay? So suppose this is high, let's say it's 5, okay? Just to show you. Suppose this is 5, and these guys are, I don't know, let's say this is 3, this is, you know, some number which is minus, okay? I don't know, let's say it's 2, okay? So whatever numbers they are, so let's just, so you see that suppose this is high, okay? So let's let's call this for A, B, okay? So this is, let's put it, so let's be proper, okay? Let's not say case 1. So let's say this. Suppose, this is what we said. ESP, the supply elasticity of this B curve is more than supply elasticity of this A curve, right? That we know. Now let's check. So when there is a change in demand, so this guy for B, this guy is going to be higher, right? So therefore, this guy is going to be lower, right? So basically, you see, this is what we said. If it's more elastic, then the change in price it's going to generate would be low. If it's low, right, the price, suppose for the A guy, because it's more inelastic, right, it's less elastic. So basically, this is a low number, right? And then because it's a low number, this is going to be, let's say, you know, it's not going to be that high. So it's going to, or if you lower this, right, this guy would be higher, okay? So you can think of it like that. So so let me write this. So let's say remark, okay, put it here. So you see the remark, suppose elasticity of this supply is higher than this guy, okay? Then you can say that EP alpha A, or let's call it B, is going to be less than EP alpha A, okay? So for the same change in income, okay, P star would, or let's put it equilibrium price will increase, okay, will increase more for case A, okay? So that's basically the inelastic case, okay? So the less elastic case is going to respond more, okay? And this is mathematically how we can show it. Is that clear? So it's basically, you know, like graphically you can all see this, but this was a way of getting it mathematically, okay? So just keep this in your mind because it will be important. You'll see that whenever we need to get the effect of a tax, we are going to use these guys, okay?